Why is there a black kid touching my registration table? Call security, now. Sir, I'm here to compete. Compete? The professor's Rolex glinted as he grabbed the boy's collar. Listen carefully, ghetto rat. Your kind doesn't compete. Your kind cleans the floors after we leave. I scored highest in qualifiers, sir. You? He snatched the boy's tattered notebook, ripped out a page. What filth is this? Caldwell Morrison? His voice thundered. Everyone! This poor little black boy from the slums says he'll solve what genius professors debated for 32 years. Laughter erupted. Hundreds of wealthy white faces, all mocking one small black child. A black schoolboy said he'd solved the problem professors debated for decades. Everyone thought it was a joke. Everyone was wrong. 4 months earlier, Lincoln Park Elementary School, South Side, Chicago. The classroom smelled like old books and broken dreams. Cracked windows letting in cold air. Peeling paint revealing older, uglier paint beneath. Desks carved with generations of bored frustration. 28 students learning multiplication tables. One student doing something else entirely. Preston Davis sat in the front row. Not by choice. His eyesight wasn't great, and his grandmother couldn't afford glasses. He was the smallest kid in 5th grade, 10 years old. Wearing clothes 2 sizes too big, hand-me-downs from his cousin TJ. While other kids struggled with 7 times 8, Preston was filling a worn notebook with equations that didn't belong in any elementary school. His pencil moved fast, numbers and symbols flowing like water. Preston Davis, what are you doing? He looked up at his teacher. Mrs. Patterson. Tired eyes, good heart. No idea what to do with him. Math, ma'am. She leaned over his shoulder, her face twisted with confusion. This isn't 5th grade math, Preston. No, ma'am. This is about lower bounds in network optimization. I'm trying to understand why Dr. Caldwell and Dr. Morrison keep arguing about it. Mrs. Patterson blinked. She had a master's degree in education. She had no idea what this child was talking about. Preston, where did you even learn about this? The library, ma'am. They have lots of books. She stared at him for a long moment, then sighed, walked away. What else could she do? Let me tell you about the Caldwell-Morrison debate. In 1993, a young professor named Richard Caldwell published a theory that shook the mathematics world. He claimed he'd discovered an absolute limit in network optimization, a boundary that couldn't be crossed, a floor that couldn't be broken. The paper was brilliant, revolutionary, and completely unproven. Dr. Eleanor Morrison at Stanford disagreed, loudly, publicly. She believed no such limit existed. The mathematics, she argued, allowed for infinite optimization. What started as academic disagreement became intellectual war. 32 years of conferences, thousands of pages of papers, hundreds of mathematicians taking sides. The field split down the middle like a cracked mirror. Caldwell versus Morrison. Neither could prove they were right. Neither would admit they might be wrong. The debate consumed careers, destroyed friendships, became the most famous unsolved argument in modern mathematics. Dr. Morrison died in 2019, still fighting, still unvindicated. And in a public library on the south side of Chicago, an 8-year-old boy found a dusty book about this very debate. Preston didn't understand why 2 smart adults would fight for decades without finding the answer, so he decided to find it himself. Preston's apartment. Evening. 2 years before the competition. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen and living room squeezed together like reluctant roommates. But it was clean. Ruby Davis made sure of that. Ruby was 71 years old, retired postal worker, raising her grandson alone since his mother passed from cancer and his father went to prison for armed robbery. She found Preston on the living room floor. Library books stacked around him like a fortress. College textbooks, graduate-level mathematics, notebooks filled with equations. She brought him dinner, sat down beside him with a groan. Her knees weren't what they used to be. "Baby, you need to eat something." Preston didn't look up. "Grandma, why do grown-ups like fighting more than finding answers?" Ruby smiled, stroked his head. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe winning matters more to them than truth." "But that's stupid. Truth doesn't care who wins." "You're right, baby. But not everyone thinks like you do." She didn't understand a single equation in those notebooks. Never would. But she understood her grandson. And she knew, deep in her bones, that he was special. Now let me tell you about Dr. Richard Caldwell, 64 years old, full professor at Northwestern University. Multiple awards, buildings named after him, 40 years in mathematics. He'd spent 32 of those years defending a theory he couldn't prove. The Caldwell conjecture, his legacy, his obsession, his identity. Every few years, someone would try to solve it. Every time, they'd fail. And every time Caldwell would smile that superior smile, because as long as no one solved it, no one proved him wrong. But there was something else about Richard Caldwell, something darker. In 40 years of teaching, he'd never had a black graduate student, never cited a black mathematician, never acknowledged that brilliance could come from those schools or those neighborhoods. His prejudice wasn't loud. It was quiet, casual, woven into every assumption, the most dangerous kind. He didn't actively hate black people. He simply didn't believe they could matter. Regional qualifiers. Illinois young mathematicians. Open. 3 weeks before the finals. Preston walked into the testing room. Superhero backpack. Too big shirt. 10 years old. Every other competitor was a teenager. 14, 16, 18. They stared at him. Is that kid lost? Someone's little brother, probably. Does he even know where he is? Preston found his seat. The desk was too tall. He had to sit on 2 thick books just to see the test paper. 2 hours later, the results came in. Preston Davis. Perfect score. Highest in the region. Highest in the history of the competition. A 10-year-old black boy from the South Side had just qualified for the state championship. Local news ran a small story. They called it heartwarming. They mispronounced his school's name. They had no idea what was coming. But someone was paying attention. Dr. Richard Caldwell reviewed the qualifier results. His pen stopped on one name. Lincoln Park Elementary. An elementary school student had qualified. A black student. From the ghetto. Caldwell picked up his phone. Who approved this entry? Sir, he met all requirements. Highest score. I don't care about scores. This is a serious competition. But the rules were clear. Preston Davis had qualified. And in 3 days, he would walk into Richard Caldwell's territory. What happens when a child from the ghetto meets the most powerful mathematician in Illinois? Registration Day. Northwestern University. Kresge Centennial Hall. The building screamed money. Marble floors polished to mirrors. Crystal chandeliers throwing rainbow light. Portraits of old white men staring down from every wall. Donors, founders, masters of the universe. Preston arrived with his grandmother Ruby and his cousin TJ. TJ was 16, big for his age, protective of his little cousin. He'd been skeptical of this whole competition thing until he watched Preston solve problems that made high schoolers cry. Now he was a true believer. "Stay close to me," Ruby whispered. She held Preston's hand tight. The lobby was packed with competitors, prep school blazers, designer clothes, parents talking about summer homes, coaches with tablets and strategy folders, and one small black boy in a shirt that used to belong to his cousin. Everyone stared. Is that child in the right building? Someone should call his parents. This must be a mistake. TJ's fists clenched. Ruby squeezed his arm hard. Not here, she whispered. Let Preston handle this. Preston approached the registration table alone. Dr. Richard Caldwell was personally overseeing registration, unusual for a professor of his stature, but he'd heard about the ghetto kid and wanted to see for himself. He looked down, way down, at the small boy standing before him. Are you lost, son? No, sir. I'm here to register. Preston Davis. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. You're the one from Lincoln Park? Yes, sir. How old are you? 10, sir. Caldwell leaned back. A smile played on his lips, the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse. Son, this competition is for serious mathematics students. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a spelling bee, something more appropriate for your background? I qualified with the highest score, sir. I'd like to register, please. Something flickered in Caldwell's eyes. Irritation, then curiosity. He processed the registration, but as he handed back the forms, Preston's notebook fell from his backpack. Caldwell picked it up, opened it. His face changed. What is this? My notebook, sir. I can see that. Caldwell flipped through pages. His expression darkened. Why are you writing about Caldwell Morrison? I'm working on it, sir. Working on it? Preston nodded, completely sincere. Yes, sir. I'm solving it. Dead silence. Then Caldwell laughed. Loud, harsh, cruel. Did everyone hear that? He held up the notebook. This little black boy from the slums thinks he's going to solve the problem that genius professors have debated for 32 years. Laughter rippled through the hall, then spread, then exploded. Hundreds of people laughing at one small child. Victoria Ashford, 17, covered her mouth and giggled. Derek Mills, 18, Caldwell's star student, shook his head with theatrical pity. Caldwell patted Preston's head, like a dog who'd done a trick. That's adorable, son. Truly adorable. But maybe focus on learning your times tables first. More laughter. Ruby and TJ watched from across the hall. TJ started forward. Ruby grabbed his arm tight enough to bruise. No, she whispered. Tears streaming down her face. Preston stood frozen, surrounded by laughing adults, his notebook in a stranger's hand. But he didn't cry. Another professor called out, Hey, kid! If you're so smart, who's right? Caldwell or Morrison? Everyone waited, ready to laugh again. Preston looked directly at Dr. Caldwell. His voice was small but clear. Dr. Caldwell is right, sir. The lower bound exists. Caldwell blinked. The boy was supporting his theory? And I can prove it. One heartbeat of silence, then the loudest laughter yet. Preston picked up his notebook, walked back to his grandmother. TJ grabbed his shoulders. You okay, little man? Preston looked up. His eyes weren't sad. They were burning. I'm going to show them, TJ. Every single one. Ruby knelt down, cupped his face in her worn hands. I know, baby. Grandma knows. What would you do if the whole world laughed at your dream? Preston Davis was about to answer that question. Competition day, round 1. 150 competitors, ages 12 to 18. The best young mathematicians in Illinois. And one 10-year-old. Preston sat at a special desk near the front. The organizers had brought cushions so he could see over the table. Some competitors snickered. Others took photos with their phones. This is ridiculous, someone muttered. It's like bring your kid to work day. Who let him in? Charity case, obviously. The round began. Multiple choice. Speed test, standard competition fare. Preston picked up his pencil, started working. He finished first. Not first among the younger students. First overall. He put his pencil down while teenagers were still on question 20. The proctor stared at him, checked the clock, checked again. "You're done?" "Yes, ma'am." She collected his paper with visible doubt. Results came 30 minutes later. Preston Davis. Perfect score. Fastest completion time in competition history. A ripple of disbelief went through the crowd. In the judging area, Caldwell watched the scoreboard. His smile faded slightly. "Multiple choice," he muttered to a colleague. "Anyone can guess." But his fingers drummed the table. Nervous. Yeah. Round 2. Proof-based problems. 40 students remained. Each would solve a complex integration problem and present their solution on the board. The room felt different now. Tense. Electric. The 10-year-old wasn't a joke anymore. Victoria Ashford went first. 17 years old. Elite private school. Years of professional tutoring. She approached the board with confidence. Wrote an elegant solution. Every step clean. Every line precise. Applause. Caldwell nodded his approval. "Textbook execution, Miss Ashford. Well done." Victoria smiled, returned to her seat. Then came Preston's turn. He walked to the front of the room. So small. The board loomed over him like a cliff face. A volunteer brought a chair. Preston climbed up, stood on it, a tiny figure with a piece of chalk. Nervous giggles from the audience. The visual was absurd. A child standing on furniture to reach a chalkboard. But Preston didn't notice. He didn't care. He started writing. His approach was different, unfamiliar. Nothing like Victoria's textbook solution. Caldwell straightened in his chair. His eyes narrowed. "Stop." Preston paused, turned around, still standing on the chair, still shorter than Caldwell even with the extra height. "You're doing it wrong, son. That's not the standard method." Preston's voice was calm, steady, a child's voice with an adult's certainty. "I'm not doing it wrong, sir. I'm doing it different." Chuckles from the crowd. A child arguing with a professor? Caldwell smiled thinly. "There's a correct way to solve this problem. You're not following it. Your way works, sir, but it's not complete." Silence crashed down like a hammer. "Excuse me? If you follow the substitution through step 3, you'll see the standard method misses a constraint." Preston pointed at the board. "My method finds it." Caldwell's face reddened. "That's absurd. The standard method is sufficient." "Sufficient isn't the same as complete, sir." Preston turned back to the board, continued writing. The room held its breath. When he finished, still standing on that chair, chalk dust on his small fingers, Dr. Patricia Whitmore leaned forward to examine his work. Whitmore was 52, professor at University of Chicago. She'd been Caldwell's student once. She knew his brilliance and his blind spots. She studied Preston's solution for a long, careful moment. He's right. The words dropped like bombs. Not just right. This approach reveals a constraint the standard method overlooks entirely. Murmuring swept through the crowd like wind through grass. Preston added one more thing, his voice calm, matter of fact, like he was explaining that the sky was blue. Actually, this is the same type of hidden constraint that's been missing from the Caldwell-Morrison debate. Both sides missed it. That's why they've been arguing for 32 years. Total silence. A 10-year-old had just connected a competition problem to the most famous unsolved debate in modern mathematics. Caldwell shot to his feet. His face was pale now. That's not relevant to this competition." Whitmore looked at him steadily. "Richard, the child just identified something I've never seen in the standard methodology, in 30 years of teaching." Caldwell's jaw tightened. He stared at Preston. This tiny boy standing on a chair, who had just exposed a flaw that hundreds of mathematicians had missed. For the first time, Something other than contempt flickered in Caldwell's eyes. Fear. "Unconventional approach," he said coldly. "We'll see if unconventional survives round 3. Preston climbed down from the chair, walked back to his seat. His grandmother was crying in the audience. TJ was grinning ear to ear. But the boy's face showed nothing. He was just getting started. Chay. The video went viral that night. Someone had recorded Preston, the tiny figure on the chair, the challenge to Caldwell, the vindication from Whitmore. Title: 10-year-old destroys Professor live. You have to see this. Comments exploded. He's so small, OMG. Standing on a chair and still smarter than everyone in the room. Caldwell's face when the kid corrected him. I'm screaming. Who is this child? Protect him at all costs. The way he said, sufficient, isn't the same as complete, so calmly. The mathematics community started buzzing. A famous professor tweeted, "Is anyone watching Illinois Young Mathematicians? A 10-year-old just said something about Caldwell Morrison that made me rethink 30 years of assumptions. I need independent verification immediately." The story was spreading like wildfire, and Dr. Richard Caldwell was starting to panic. That night, Caldwell's office, alone, door locked, lights dim, screen glowing. He watched the video again, and again, and again. The boy on the chair, the words about the hidden constraint. It's the same type of constraint missing from Caldwell Morrison. Caldwell's hand trembled on the mouse. 32 years. His life's work. His legacy. Could a child from the ghetto actually understand something he'd missed? No. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. But the fear wouldn't go away. He picked up his phone. I need to see the finals problems. All of them. Tonight. He was already forming a plan. If this boy wanted to prove something, Caldwell would give him the chance, and watch him burn. The question was, who was really walking into whose trap? Round 3. Semifinals. 12 competitors remained. 11 teenagers. 1 10-year-old. The visual was striking. Tall, confident high schoolers in matching blazers and pressed shirts. And Preston Davis, still carrying his superhero backpack, still wearing clothes 2 sizes too big. A child among almost adults. The rules changed for this round. Judges could ask follow-up questions. Scoring became subjective. That's rigged, TJ whispered to Ruby in the audience. They can just decide they don't like his answer. Ruby's jaw was tight. Then he'll give answers they can't argue with. Preston faced Derek Mills in direct competition. Derek was everything Preston wasn't. 18 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, son of a surgeon and a corporate lawyer, 2 years as Caldwell's personal mentee, last year's state champion. He looked down at Preston, literally down, by nearly 2 feet, and smiled. The smile of a predator. Hey, little guy. Derek squatted to Preston's level, mocking. What games do you play? Fortnite? Minecraft? Roblox? Preston looked up at him. Why do you ask? Just curious. Derek's smile widened. Because after this round, you'll have lots of free time for gaming. I don't play games much. I like reading math books better. Derek laughed, stood up, walked away. The problem was difficult. Graduate-level difficulty. Both solved it correctly. But Derek's presentation was polished, rehearsed, professional. He made eye contact with judges, used pauses effectively, even cracked a joke that made Caldwell laugh. Preston's presentation was sparse, efficient. No performance, no charm, just mathematics, raw and unadorned. Caldwell scored Derek higher. Superior communication skills and presentation clarity. Preston advanced to the finals, but barely. Derek passed him afterward, leaned down close. Hey, Caldwell Morrison kid, you still think you can solve it? Yes. That's cute, really cute. Derek patted his head, the same way Caldwell had. Good luck, little buddy. You're going to need it. Preston said nothing, but his eyes tracked Derek all the way across the room. The live stream numbers exploded. What started as a few hundred math enthusiasts became tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Someone had clipped Preston's round 2 moment and posted it everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Reddit. Title, Kid laughed at for saying he'd solve 32-year math debate. Then this happened. Views, 800,000 and climbing fast. Comments scrolled endlessly. I literally cannot stop watching this child. The way he said sufficient isn't the same as complete. I felt that. Caldwell looked like someone slapped him with a fish. Who raised this kid? I need parenting tips. Bro, he's 10. T-E-N. 10 years old. I'm deceased. Plot twist. He actually solves it, and we all lose our minds. The mathematics community was buzzing intensely. Caldwell supporters, if the kid proves Caldwell right, that's a massive win for our side. Morrison supporters, no way. A 10-year-old can't solve what we couldn't in 3 decades. Neutral observers, everyone shut up and watch. This is the most interesting thing to happen in mathematics in years. The pressure multiplied exponentially. This wasn't just a high school competition anymore, it was a global event. And Preston Davis was at the center of it all. Caldwell's office, late night, hours after the semifinals. He sat in darkness, screen glowing white-blue on his face. The video played again, Preston on the chair, the hidden constraint. His own words echoed, "That's absurd. The standard method is sufficient." And the boy's response, "Sufficient isn't the same as complete." Caldwell closed his eyes. His head pounded. 32 years. Hundreds of papers. Thousands of lectures. His name on buildings. His theory in textbooks. And he'd never been able to prove it himself. Now a 10-year-old from the ghetto was claiming he could. Impossible. It had to be impossible. But what if it wasn't? His phone buzzed. A colleague. Richard, have you seen the numbers? The live stream has 300,000 pre-registrations for the finals. News outlets are calling. I've seen. This is incredible publicity. The kid is famous. You should embrace this. I know what I should do. He hung up, stared at the screen. If no one could solve it, Caldwell remained the authority, the expert, the genius who posed the question too brilliant for mere mortals. But if someone did solve it, everything changed. Unless that person failed publicly, spectacularly, humiliatingly, in front of the entire world. Then the story became, child prodigy exposed as fraud, Caldwell right all along. He pulled up the finals problem set. The official problems were standard, difficult but solvable, appropriate for high school finalists. His finger hovered over the edit button. What if he changed it? What if the finals problem was Caldwell Morrison itself? No student could actually solve it. Not really. The scoring would be based on approach and methodology, subjective criteria that Caldwell controlled absolutely. The boy would fail. The world would watch. The laughter would be permanent. And Richard Caldwell would remain the undisputed master of his domain. He clicked edit, started typing, changed the problem. The trap was set. But Caldwell had no idea what was waiting in that worn notebook. He had no idea at all. The night before the finals. Preston's apartment. Ruby found her grandson on the living room floor. The same spot he always chose. Books everywhere. Notebooks open. Pencil moving in the dim light. She brought him warm milk and cookies. Her grandmother's recipe. Sat down beside him with a groan that came from 71 years of living. Baby, it's 9 o'clock. Big day tomorrow. I know, Grandma. Just checking one more time. Ruby looked at the pages scattered around him. Equations that looked like alien languages to her eyes. Symbols she couldn't begin to understand. But she understood the boy holding the pencil. "Preston, can I ask you something?" "Yes, Grandma?" "Why do you want to prove that man right?" She couldn't hide the edge in her voice. "Dr. Caldwell. He was so cruel to you. He humiliated you in front of everyone." Preston stopped writing, looked up at her. His small face was serious, old somehow. "Because he is right, Grandma. Him being mean to me doesn't make him wrong about math." "But doesn't it make you angry? What he did?" Preston thought about it, really thought, the way he always did. "I am angry, but—" He searched for the right words. "Grandma, if I don't prove it because I'm mad at him, then I'm just like them, letting feelings decide instead of truth." Ruby's eyes filled with tears. This child. This impossible child. "You talk like an old man, baby. Like you've lived 100 years. Preston smiled. And suddenly, he was just a 10-year-old again. "But can I still have chocolate ice cream tomorrow, if I win?" Ruby laughed through her tears, pulled him into a hug. "You can have all the ice cream in the world, baby." Montage, 10 hours to finals. Preston worked. Alone. Just him and the notebook. Cut to Derek Mills in Caldwell's private office. Professional coaching. Strategy sessions. Mock problems and rehearsed presentations. Cut to Victoria Ashford with her team of tutors. 3 adults preparing one 17-year-old. Flashcards. Practice boards. Confidence exercises. Cut back to Preston. Small figure on a worn carpet. No tutors, no coaches, no strategy team. Just a notebook and a dream. Mini victory. Preston found a way to simplify step 4 of his proof. Cleaner, faster, more elegant. He smiled and kept writing. Mini setback. His pen ran out of ink. He searched his backpack. Nothing. He had to use his grandmother's old pencil, the one she used for crossword puzzles. The eraser was worn to nothing. Mini victory. Tea. Jay showed up at the door with bags of food. "Grandma sent me. She says you need to eat." Preston ate while working. A sandwich in one hand, pencil in the other. Crumbs fell on his notebook. He brushed them away without looking up. Mini setback. Exhaustion hit like a wall. His head drooped. His pencil slipped. The numbers blurred. He jerked awake, forced himself to focus. But his 10-year-old body couldn't fight biology. He fell asleep on the floor, surrounded by mathematics, cheek pressed against a page about bounded functions. Ruby came out at midnight, found him there, small, vulnerable, still clutching his pencil. She didn't wake him, just got a blanket, covered him gently, kissed his forehead. "Sleep well, baby. Tomorrow you show them who you really are." The internet wasn't sleeping. Hashtag #MathKid was trending nationally, then internationally. "I haven't been this invested in anything since the World Cup. That child is carrying the hopes of every underdog who ever lived. If Caldwell rigged this to humiliate a 10-year-old, I will personally riot. Preston, if you're reading this, we believe in you. I'm a grown man crying over a math competition. What is my life?" The mathematics community was deeply divided. Skeptics. "It's a publicity stunt. The kid got lucky in early rounds. Reality will hit tomorrow." Believers. "Did you watch the round 2 video? He understands something fundamental." Realists. "Caldwell Morrison is unsolvable. This will end in tears, hopefully not on camera." But everyone agreed on one thing. They would be watching. 5 a.m. Preston woke up, still on the floor, still surrounded by papers, back aching from the hard carpet. For a moment he didn't know where he was. Then he remembered. Finals day. He sat up slowly, looked at his work. 2 years of research. 17 notebooks filled. Every idea, every approach, every dead end and breakthrough, all leading to today. His stomach hurt, not from hunger, from fear. What if he was wrong? What if he'd missed something? What if they laughed at him again and this time he deserved it? A knock at the door made him jump. Ruby was still asleep. Preston padded over, stood on tiptoes to look through the peephole. Dr. Patricia Whitmore stood in the hallway. He opened the door. Dr. Whitmore? Good morning, Preston. May I come in? They sat in the small kitchen. Preston on a chair that was too big for him, feet dangling. Whitmore across the table with a cup of coffee Ruby had made before going back to bed. I apologize for coming so early, but I needed to speak with you before the competition. About what, ma'am? Whitmore studied him. This small child. This improbable genius. Preston, do you truly believe you can prove the solution? He nodded without hesitation. Yes, ma'am. You understand that if you're right, it will change everything? 32 years of debate? Careers built on this question. All ended by a 10-year-old boy. I understand, ma'am, but... He paused, found his words. I'm not doing it because it's big. I'm doing it because it's true. Truth matters more than how big or small something is, doesn't it? Whitmore stared at him. In 30 years of academia, she'd heard brilliant people say stupid things. She'd heard mediocre people say nothing memorable. She'd never heard a child speak like this. The finals problem was changed last night, she said finally. Dr. Caldwell changed it. To Caldwell Morrison. Preston nodded slowly. I thought he might. You knew? I figured he would, after round 2, after what I said about the hidden constraint. Whitmore leaned back. You planned for this? You wanted him to do this? I hoped for it, ma'am. Preston touched his notebook. He could have given any problem, something I'd never seen. But this one, he almost smiled. This one I've been working on for 2 years. Preston, I need you to understand something important. I was outvoted on this change. Dr. Caldwell wants you to fail, publicly, humiliatingly. He changed the problem specifically to destroy you. I know, ma'am. And you're not afraid. Preston was quiet for a long moment. I'm scared, ma'am. Really, really scared. His voice was small, a child's voice. But my grandma says being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing it anyway. Whitmore stood up, walked to the door, turned back. For what it's worth, Preston Davis, I hope you prove him wrong. About everything except the mathematics. Then she was gone. Preston sat alone in the kitchen. Dawn light streaming through the window. Ruby appeared in the doorway. Who was that, baby? A professor, Grandma. She came to warn me. Warn you about what? That today is going to be the hardest day of my life. Preston looked at his grandmother. But she also came to tell me she believes in me. I think. Ruby knelt down, took his hands in hers. Listen to me, baby. Today you're going to walk into a room full of people who don't want you there. People who think you're nothing. People who will do everything they can to make you fail. I know, Grandma. But you know what they don't know? What? They don't know my grandson. Her voice was fierce. They don't know what you've survived. They don't know that you've been preparing for this moment your whole life. She squeezed his hands. They see a little black boy from the ghetto. They don't see the giant inside. Preston hugged her, tight. I won't let you down, Grandma.
Baby, you couldn't let me down if you tried. Now go get dressed. We have a competition to win. 2 hours later, they walked out the door. Ruby in her best church dress, TJ
in a borrowed blazer that didn't quite fit, and Preston in his too big shirt, his superhero backpack, and his worn notebook, ready to change history. Finals morning, Northwestern University, Kresge Centennial Hall. The room was transformed. Television cameras everywhere, professional lighting, a stage that hadn't existed 2 days ago. 8 finalists sat in a row of chairs, 7 teenagers in matching competition blazers, 1 10-year-old in hand-me-down clothes. The live stream counter showed 300,000 viewers, still climbing. Ruby and TJ found seats in the packed audience. Ruby clutched her purse like a lifeline. TJ couldn't stop bouncing his knee. The screen behind the stage flickered to life. The finals problem appeared. Caldwell-Morrison boundary problem. The room gasped. Actually, gasped. Like a single organism that had been punched. 32 years, 200 mathematicians, countless failed attempts. Now a test question for high school students. The audience erupted in whispers that weren't really whispers. That's not possible. That's not a competition problem. That's literally unsolvable. What is Caldwell doing? TJ grabbed Ruby's arm hard. They can't do that. That's the problem nobody can solve. Ruby's jaw was set like stone. Preston can. On stage, finalists looked at each other in visible shock. Victoria Ashford's face went milk-white. Derek Mills started writing, then stopped, then stared at the ceiling. Dr. Caldwell stood at the podium, smiling like a satisfied cat. This year, we've decided to challenge our finalists with one of mathematics' most enduring questions. His voice was smooth, reasonable. No one expects a full solution, of course. We'll be scoring based on approach and methodology. His eyes found Preston in the row of chairs. Of course, one of our competitors has publicly claimed he already knows the answer. His smile widened. So this is his opportunity to prove it. Scattered laughter from certain sections of the audience. Preston didn't react to the laughter. He was staring at the problem on the screen. His problem. The one he'd found in a library book when he was 8 years old. The one that filled 17 notebooks at home. The one in the worn notebook on his lap right now. Slowly, a small smile crossed his face. In the audience, Ruby saw it. She grabbed TJ's hand so hard he winced. Look at his face! TJ looked, and despite everything, he grinned too. The man tried to trap him. Yes, but Preston was ready. He's been ready for 2 years, baby. On stage, Preston opened his notebook. The pages were soft from constant handling. Equations covered every inch. He'd hoped for this, planned for it, dreamed of it. Caldwell thought he was setting a trap, an impossible problem to humiliate a child in front of the world. But he'd just given Preston Davis exactly what he needed. A stage, an audience, and the problem he'd already solved. The timer started. 2 hours, 8 students, 1 impossible question. But for Preston Davis, the question wasn't impossible. It was finally time. 1 hour into the finals. Camera crews circled the stage like sharks smelling blood. Every scratch of pencil was captured, every sigh, every frustrated headshake. Derek Mills had filled 5 pages with calculations. All dead ends. His confident smile had vanished completely. Victoria Ashford tried 3 different approaches. None worked. She stared at her paper like it had personally betrayed her. Other finalists gave up one by one. One girl put her head down on the desk. A boy started doodling in the margins. Another just sat there, staring at nothing. And Preston? Preston was writing, crossing out, writing again. His pencil moving fast, then slow, then fast again. To the cameras, it looked like struggle, like a child drowning in deep water. But the cameras didn't know what Preston was actually doing. He wasn't trying to solve the problem. He'd solved it 2 years ago. He was trying to find the clearest way to explain it, the most elegant path through the proof, the simplest way to make them understand. And then he saw it. A flaw. Not in his solution, in his proof. A gap, a logical jump that needed one more step, something he'd never noticed in 2 years of work. His pencil stopped. His face went pale. 2 years, 17 notebooks, and he'd missed something. In the audience, Ruby saw the change in her grandson's expression. Her hand flew to her chest. She couldn't breathe. "Something's wrong," she whispered. TJ leaned forward. "What? What is it?" "I don't know, but something's wrong." On stage, Preston stared at his notebook. The Gap stared back, mocking him. Everything Caldwell believed about him was about to come true. The ghetto kid, the charity case, the impossible dreamer who flew too close to the sun. His eyes started to burn. His lip trembled. 10 years old. Just 10 years old. The live stream chat exploded. "Is the kid crying?" "Oh, no. I think he gave up. Called it. He's too young. Poor little dude. This was never going to work." Caldwell watched from the judge's table. He leaned forward. His smile returned. This was the moment. The exact moment he'd orchestrated. The moment the fairy tale ended. The moment reality crushed hope. Exactly as planned. Preston closed his notebook. He wanted to disappear. To be anywhere else. To go home and hug his grandmother and forget he'd ever tried. They'd all been right. He was just a child. Just a poor black kid from the ghetto who didn't know his place. Who was he to challenge professors? Who was he to think he could matter? The seconds ticked by, the longest of his life. And then, a voice. His grandmother's voice. From somewhere deep in his memory. "They don't know my grandson. They don't know the giant inside." Another voice, his own, from the kitchen table this morning. "Truth matters more than how big or small something is." And another, an 8-year-old in a library, asking a question no one else thought to ask. Why do they keep fighting instead of finding the truth? Preston opened his eyes, opened his notebook, looked at the gap, and suddenly, like sunlight breaking through clouds, he saw it. The gap wasn't a flaw, it was a feature. The missing step was the hidden constraint. The same one he'd mentioned in round 2. The variable that both Caldwell and Morrison had overlooked for 32 years. When he added it, the proof didn't just work. It became beautiful, elegant, simple. His pencil started moving. Fast now, certain, unstoppable. In the audience, Ruby saw the change, the fear melting into focus, the doubt becoming determination. "There," she whispered, tears streaming. "There he is." TJ watched his little cousin writing like his life depended on it. "What happened?" He figured it out. "How do you know?" Ruby smiled through her tears. "Because I know my grandson." On stage, Preston Davis was no longer a frightened child. He was a mathematician, and he had 45 minutes to change the world. The chat didn't know what was happening. Wait, is he writing again? False alarm, maybe? That's a lot of writing for someone who gave up. What is happening? Only one person in that room knew for certain, Preston himself, and he wasn't stopping until everyone else knew too. Time was called. The buzzer echoed through the silent hall, pencils down, 8 students, 8 attempts, 8 different approaches to the impossible. One by one, they walked to the board to present. Derek Mills went first, tall, polished. His voice didn't waver, even though his answer was incomplete. I applied the Hopkinson-Maclaurin approach, but was unable to resolve the boundary condition. The problem remains unsolved. Caldwell nodded sagely. Excellent effort, Mr. Mills. The rigor of your methodology is commendable. Victoria Ashford next, composed despite her obvious frustration. My recursive approach showed initial promise, but couldn't overcome the convergence issue. I conclude that additional time would be necessary for a complete solution. Well reasoned. Thank you, Miss Ashford. One by one. All the same story. I couldn't solve it. The problem is too complex. Given more time, perhaps. Each time, Caldwell nodded approvingly. Each time, he looked more relaxed, more confident. The competition was going exactly as planned. The impossible problem had proven impossible, just as he knew it would. Then came the last presenter. Mr. Davis. Preston stood, walked to the front of the room, so small against the massive board behind him. A volunteer brought the chair. Preston climbed up, stood on it. His head barely reached the middle of the board. 400,000 people watching the live stream now. Caldwell smiled the smile of a man who had already won. Mr. Davis, if you'd like to simply describe your approach, that's perfectly acceptable. No one expects you to actually solve. I'd like to present my solution, sir. The smile flickered, died. Your solution? To Caldwell Morrison? Yes, sir. Preston's voice was clear, strong, certain. And like I said before, you're right. The lower bound exists. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like waves. Caldwell spread his hands magnanimously. Well then, by all means, show us. Preston picked up the chalk, turned to the board, and began. Step 1. He wrote the framework of the debate. Both sides. Caldwell's position, Morrison's position, showing he understood exactly what had been argued for 32 years. The audience watched in absolute silence. Step 2. He identified the exact point where both sides diverged, the specific assumption where they went in different directions. And then, the crucial moment, he identified what both sides had missed, a hidden variable, a constraint that neither Caldwell nor Morrison had ever considered. Gasps from the mathematicians scattered through the audience. Step 3. He introduced the constraint into the equation, showed how it connected to the original problem, how it changed everything, and began building the proof. Caldwell rose from his seat, started walking toward the board. His face was unreadable. His hands were shaking. Step 4. The proof took shape, layer by layer, logic building on logic. Every step clear, every transition valid, every conclusion inevitable. Whitmore was writing frantically, checking his work in real time. Other mathematicians in the audience were doing the same. Phones were out, photos being taken. Step 5. The final line. Preston wrote a single equation at the bottom of the board. Elegant, simple, beautiful. The kind of mathematics that makes grown scholars weep with recognition. He put down the chalk, turned around, still standing on the chair, still barely chest-high to the adults around him. The Caldwell-Morrison debate can be settled. The lower bound exists. Dr. Caldwell was right from the beginning. Dead silence. 400,000 viewers watching. No one breathed. Then Caldwell reached the board, pushed past Preston, started reading every line like his life depended on it. His hand was trembling visibly now. This variable. No one. In 32 years. He searched desperately for a flaw. Any flaw. Something. Anything. To tear apart. Step 3. Your convergence assumption. Verified in the appendix, sir. Preston's voice was calm, patient. Page 5. 3 independent verification methods. Caldwell flipped to page 5 of the submitted work. Read. His face went white as paper. Whitmore stood up. Her voice cut through the silence like a bell. Richard, the proof appears valid. From the audience, a professor from the Morrison camp rose to his feet. I'll need independent verification, but if this holds... He trailed off, shook his head in disbelief. A 10-year-old just ended a 32-year debate. The room exploded. Not laughter this time, something else entirely. Shock, awe, wonder, disbelief transforming into belief. And on stage, Preston Davis, 10 years old, standing on a chair, chalk dust on his small brown fingers, looked up at Dr. Richard Caldwell. You were right all along, sir. You just missed one variable. He paused, his head tilted, pure childlike honesty in his eyes. I don't understand why no one found it in 32 years. It wasn't that hard. It wasn't that hard. 5 words, from a 10-year-old, about a problem that had consumed entire careers, destroyed professional friendships, filled libraries with failed attempts. Not that hard. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Many did both. Ruby Davis did both, tears streaming down her face, laughing with pure, uncontainable joy. TJ jumped up, screaming at the top of his lungs. That's my cousin! That's my baby cousin right there! The live stream chat became pure chaos. An incomprehensible wall of capital letters and exclamation points and crying emojis and keyboard smashing. And Dr. Richard Caldwell stood frozen. He'd dreamed of this moment for 32 years, being proven right, finally vindicated after decades of doubt. But in none of those dreams, not a single one, had it looked like this. Not a distinguished colleague presenting at a conference, not a peer review board issuing a formal verdict, not a Nobel committee calling with news. A child, a black child, from the ghetto, standing on a chair, with chalk dust on his hands, wearing clothes too big for him, who'd just done in 2 years what Caldwell couldn't do in 32. Whitmore's voice rang out across the hall. The proof is valid. The Caldwell-Morrison debate, after 32 years, is resolved. By Preston Davis, age 10, Lincoln Park Elementary School, South Side, Chicago. The room erupted into a standing ovation, complete chaos. But Preston wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at Caldwell, and Caldwell was looking at him. 64 years old and 10 years old. A lifetime of credentials and a worn notebook. 2 completely different worlds. One single truth. The celebration had barely begun when the news broke. A judge approached Dr. Whitmore with a tablet. His face was grim. Patricia, you need to see this. She looked at the screen. Her expression hardened. The finals problem had been changed 4 hours before the competition. The original problem was standard, a difficult but ordinary optimization challenge. Caldwell had personally replaced it with his own life's work. He changed the problem, Whitmore said quietly. He changed it specifically to humiliate a 10-year-old boy. The information leaked within minutes. Someone on the committee tipped off a reporter, then another, then social media got hold of it. The headlines spread like wildfire. Professor Riggs' competition to crush child prodigy. Child solves his life's work instead. Caldwell changed problem to humiliate 10-year-old. It backfired spectacularly. The trap that backfired. How a racist professor made a child a legend. Caldwell saw the headlines appearing on phones around him. The color drained from his face. Northwestern University went into damage control. They needed a statement, a photo, something to salvage the situation. Which meant Caldwell had to shake Preston's hand, in front of everyone. They stood facing each other, the 64-year-old professor in his expensive suit, the 10-year-old boy in his hand-me-down clothes, Cameras everywhere, the world watching. Silence stretched. Caldwell's voice came out hoarse. You did something I couldn't do in 32 years. Preston looked up at him. Way up. His voice wasn't angry, just curious. Sir, why did you laugh at me that day? Didn't you know I could do it? Caldwell couldn't answer. You were right about the math, sir, but you were wrong about me. A pause. Then, but it's okay. I forgive you. Caldwell blinked. You forgive me? Yes, sir. My grandma says you shouldn't stay angry at people who don't know what they're doing wrong. Preston's voice was matter-of-fact. A child explaining something simple. You didn't know I could do it. Now you know. Something broke in Caldwell's face. For just a moment, one single moment, his eyes glistened. He extended his hand. Preston shook it. A large white hand. A small black hand. 64 years of pride meeting 10 years of grace. The cameras captured everything, and the world witnessed something rarer than mathematical genius. They witnessed forgiveness. The award ceremony. Preston Davis stood on stage, a trophy nearly half his size in his arms. The announcer's voice filled the hall. The solution to the Caldwell-Morrison boundary problem, effective immediately, will be formally known as the Davis proof. Not Caldwell Davis. Not the Caldwell proof. The Davis proof. Caldwell sat in the front row. His face showed nothing, but everyone knew. His name would forever be linked to the boy he'd tried to humiliate. History would remember them together, and history would not be kind. After the ceremony, Preston ran to his grandmother. "Grandma, I did it!" Ruby caught him, hugged him tight, sobbed into his shoulder. "I know, baby. I watched the whole thing. The whole building watched. The whole neighborhood watched." "Grandma, can I have chocolate ice cream now?" Ruby laughed through her tears. "Baby, you can have all the chocolate ice cream on earth." Evening. Chicago skyline, sunset painting everything gold. Preston walked out of the building with Ruby and TJ, the superhero backpack on his shoulders, the worn notebook in his hands, the trophy somewhere behind them, too heavy for a 10-year-old to carry. TJ threw his arm around Preston. Bro, you just ended a 32-year argument on live TV after the whole world laughed at you. Do you understand what you did?" "I just did math, TJ." "Just did math? 10 years old." Preston laughed, a child's laugh, pure and free. Ruby took his hand. "What are you going to do now, baby?" Preston thought about it. "I don't know, Grandma, but the library has lots of other math books. Maybe there's another problem that grown-ups are fighting about instead of solving." They walked into the sunset, the small boy between two people who loved him. And somewhere out there, another child was watching. Another kid in a broken-down school, in too big clothes, with dreams too big for the world to accept. Another kid who'd just seen living proof that it was possible. Preston Davis didn't just solve a math problem that day. He solved the problem of being underestimated, of being dismissed, of being laughed at by everyone who thought they were better. And he did it the only way that matters. By being so good they couldn't ignore him. If you're that kid, the one everyone laughs at, keep going. The world will catch up. And if you know that kid, share this story. Because sometimes the biggest answers come from the smallest people.